Chair, we're now live on YouTube.
So welcome everybody. I can see that all the committee is now present and correct. So we will begin. Obviously the first bit is for me to read out a few rules of procedure that are specific to virtual meetings according to government regulations. So as I said, welcome to the Manydown Overview Committee. The meeting is being streamed live on YouTube and can be viewed after the meeting has finished. Councillors on this committee are identified by name on the screen, and I will introduce the officers by name before they address the committee. Councillors are asked to note that although this meeting is being held remotely, they are regarded as being present in a meeting of the council, and the normal rules of behaviour apply under the Member Code of Conduct. No household distractions, please, including mobile phones. If you could switch them off or to silent now. Thank you. Members of the committee will turn on their video link during the meeting and keep their microphones muted unless they have been invited to speak by me as the chair. Members are reminded that if they switch off their video link or move away from the camera, they will be treated as leaving the meeting and will not be able to take part in any vote taken on the item under discussion. Members can indicate their wish to speak by raising their hand and should only speak when I invite them to do so. The officers present will only switch their video link on during the item that they are presenting or where they wish the chair to invite them to speak. As chair, I will confirm the name of any visiting speaker at the appropriate time in the agenda and invite them to speak to the committee. Councillors should declare that they are leaving the meeting and switch off their video link if they have a disclosable pecuniary interest or other personal interest in an item on the agenda. Councillors can switch on their video link when I call the next agenda item. Should there be a formal vote, it will be taken by roll call and I will confirm the recommendation and it will be for, against or abstain. Not likely in this case, I think. Any lost connections, please email Democratic Services and re-access the meeting via the link. Okay, so that's the preliminaries over and we will now move on to the agenda if you've got it before you. Item number 1, apologies for absence and substitutions. I can see that all committee members are here, so that's good. Item number 2, are there any declarations of interest on any items on the agenda? No, okay, thank you. I haven't been notified of any urgent matters unless any councillor has one to raise now. No, thank you. So let's move on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of June 2021. Somebody who's there, could they propose and somebody second that these are correct?
I think I can propose.
Oh, Councillor James and Councillor Dillo, can you second? Yeah, okay. Are we all agreed that they're accurate? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our main agenda item, as usual, is to receive an update on where we are with Manydown. The update report is at item 5 in the agenda pack, starting on page 11. So first, can I invite Councillor Isaac to introduce the report on Manydown North, please? Thank you.
Good evening, Councillor Taylor and fellow councillors. Yes, this is the Manydown programme update report, which gives an overview of the progress on both Manydown North and Manydown South. And as always, we look forward to hearing your observations and comments. As you'll appreciate, following the signing of the development agreement with Urban and Civic, we on our side as Basingstoke and Dean are now structured to provide a sort of client-side function to assist Urban and Civic and MDV in the delivery of Manydown North. Clearly, Manydown South is a separate matter which doesn't involve Urban and Civic, and there our officer team and consultants are providing project management to enable us to achieve a promotion of Manydown South, including the wider strategic planning within the context of the local plan update. I think we're going to hear from the Urban and Civic MDV development manager tonight, who's going to provide us with an update on the work that he and his team have been doing. Obviously, from my point of view, I am there to constantly remind them of delivery and the need to achieve certain key milestones. And so we'll be hearing about some of those tonight, particularly the section 106, which attaches to the outline planning permission we received some time ago. I'm told that that is close to completion. So again, we'd be good to hear about what the latest position is. Also, some explanation of the future planning strategy. That's the submission of a series of site-wise strategies and frameworks, which will cover layout, land use, and character and appearance, to be followed by key phase documents, which are the tier 2 parts of the future planning strategy for each phase of development, including design codes, and then drilling down to the detailed scheme designs, which is tier 3. Also, be good to hear about how we're progressing in relation to the Countryside Park. And I understand that MDV have appointed a consultancy called Planet, PLANIT, to help them on that. So it'd be good to have an update on the emerging principles. Also, a key component of what we're looking for Urban and Civic to deliver is the overarching business plan. And that's going to establish the key principles that phase 1 and other phases of the development will follow and be reviewed against. And the overarching business plan will cover marketing, employment and skills, country park strategy, management and ownership, the Manydown standard, including sustainability, our land drawdown strategy, how we're going to, the way in which we're going to proceed with drawing down the land at Manydown North to enable us to develop it, drawing it down from the Manydown company, who are still the freeholders, and also our estate management approach. Another important ingredient in all this is going to be the financial model, and that so we're looking for an update on how things are progressing in relation to that, because that will cover things like the forecasting of cash flows and, very importantly for us as a council, returns that we may expect, the financial returns we may expect from the project. So we look forward to an update on the overarching business plan. The report also notes that we have now terminated part of the farm business tenancy in relation to Manydown North. That was done in September of this year, and that will enable us to obtain vacant possession of the site so that development can start taking place in 2022. The report also refers to some work that's being done on modernising, if you like, refining the 10 principles that we agreed should apply as both councils to Manydown. Those principles, if I can remind you, were agreed in 2016. And so the MDV are working on refining and, I suppose, simplifying them as well. So we'll be interested to hear about what's going on there. Obviously, there's a key area for us all, given our commitment to reducing our carbon footprint and so forth, is sustainability. And so it'll be interesting to hear what the latest thinking is in relation to that in terms of Manydown North. In particular the Manydown standard, because it's important that we strive to become a low carbon sustainable community with reduced energy demand. And also thinking about what is before us tomorrow evening at full council, and the ecological aspects of all this as well. There's a section on financials in the report, which summarises the total Manydown North and Manydown South programme costs compared to budget for 21-22, and also a statement on the current year forecasts of capital investment in loans that we are making to, as a council, to MGC LLP, with some tasty returns on those. Then something else that is being worked at the moment is a dedicated branding for Manydown North, which is being finalised by Urban and Civic and MDV, and I think that also will include the launch of a specific website for Manydown North. There's also a need for us to at least discuss, Chairman, whether we have another go at arranging a visit to Urban and Civic's development at Halton, near Rugby. Perhaps you'd like to take that on board at some point, because I think it would be really good if we could go and see what they've been able to achieve, and so I'll leave that with you, if I may. And then turning now to Manydown South, as I've said, this is work that we as the two councils are leading without MDV. And the report updates Mock on the work that we've been carrying out to include Manydown South in the local plan update. And we're also, as part of that, continuing to collaborate with the other major landholder in Manydown, in the southern Manydown area, which is SMV. That also, as you would expect, entails us continuing to talk to the Hampshire Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust on the possible inclusion of a new hospital near Junction 7 of the M3. And so work is therefore being focused on getting ourselves into shape ahead of the LPA's Regulation 18 statutory consultation in relation to the local plan update in spring 2022. which will map out its preferred strategy for future growth, including, I hope, Manydown South. And a lot of technical work that's going on to enable us to meet the requirements of the local planning authority in that regard. So that really brings me to an end, Chair, in relation to the update.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rattigan, do you want to add in anything about Manydown South?
I would be grateful. Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate what Councillor Isaac has said, that there are many moving parts on the Manydown South piece, but just to give this committee some shape of some of the things that have been done in the background over and above the report in front of you. I spoke to Peter Hoof, from Hoof Housing. Although we are not about to build £2 million houses on our Manydown world, it is important that we use the best of design and technology into whatever we bring forward. And there are people within the architectural world that are prepared to help us in that. And I expect in the next couple of weeks that he will be visiting Basingstoke and the site in Manydown to guide us on many of the principles that have allowed him to be successful as an architect of great note and renown within not just Germany, but of course his homes here in England. Further to that, I have had discussions with partners about how we don't have the same complications that we've had with North Manydown when we move to the southern piece, and that is including conversations with the Chief Executive of Hampshire County Council and the Leader of County Council to ascertain A, what they would like us to deliver there, but B, if there is a financial model that could bring forward some MRT that will benefit both elements of Manydown. Those are ongoing discussions, but discussions nonetheless that I think will be productive and will allow us to have a little bit more control as we move forward with the two projects. So I just wanted to lay that in. Obviously, Councillor Isaac has alluded to the fact that the hospital world is where it is, but it needs to be said here and in public. Obviously, they are slowing down that process of delivery, and that adds another level of complication to our world. But I look forward to the LPA bringing on Manydown in some shape or form to our local plan. I think it gives us guidance and will give us some structure in which we can both deliver infrastructure, homes, and the financial well-being of us as a borough. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. Before we ask questions and make our own comments, I'd like to hear from our two visiting speakers, if I may invite them to come to their microphones. The first one is Mr. Alex Lee. Could I invite you to come in, and you have 2 minutes to make your comments, Mr. Lee.
Hello, Madam Chair, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're loud and clear, thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, this isn't, I guess, going to be a combined mix of statements, questions, queries, and trying to understand what's going on. When I looked at the report from Councillor Isaac and the council, I was, to be honest, quite deflated by it. Madam Chair, we've had about 462 days since the outline planning permission was passed, and I'm hoping tonight with the report from the company themselves that we'll hear some maybe more concrete decisions and proposals. But all I see in front of me is a document that tells me we're going to do a hell of a lot more planning. No timelines around when that planning is going to take place. We've got 3 tiers with no structure around them, just that they're going to be 3 tiers of planning and nothing further around that. A reminder, we're 462 days since passing outline planning permission, and we don't seem to have any clear vision as to when we're actually going to start putting shovels into the ground, diggers into the ground. No clear concept of ownership. I can remember sitting in on one of these committees maybe last year or the year before, And Councillor James raised a relevant point around the ownership of the country park. You know, where do the boundaries fall on that? There's nothing substantial to come out of this report. 462 days since passing the outline planning permission. It was interesting to read that you've got the consultancy team coming in to consult on the country park, and I'm just wondering, they mentioned in 3.3.1 of the report that residents have raised have supported strong walking and cycling links from the existing communities, and I'm hoping that as part of the consultancy that the Planet company plan to do, that they will include those proposals, and whether that would link in to the existing communities, or whether it is just going to be around the ownership, how we look at biodiversity, etc., or whether it is actually going to go further than that and link in the wider Basingstoke community, especially Winklebury, who would need significant upgrades to their pathways to link, you know, the eastern edge of Manydown to the town centre, and also significant spend on bridges to get them across the ringway. So that's really that. Again, interesting to note that the development manager will provide an update on the construction traffic strategy, and this is something that is close to my heart. I think I've raised it a number of times. I'm hoping to hear that they're going to plan on entering into the construction site along the A339. I've given you the fact about 462 days since the outline planning permission, but putting traffic down the Roman road is going to will definitely impact on 712 households. Okay, that's about just shy of 1,400 people. And then indirectly from that, because people will start rat running through the likes of Elmwood Way, Tiverton Road, is that could directly impact a further just shy of 2,000 people. So I think it's important.
Mr. Lee, if I could interrupt, I'm so sorry,
yep,
but
that's fine.
We've gone well over your time.
Oh, sorry.
But we have a note of your various comments, at least I have anyway.
Thank you very much.
So I wonder if it might be opportune just to ask Councillor Isaac or officers if they want to comment on anything at this stage that Mr. Lee has said.
Sure, yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lee, and I'm grateful to you for your continuing interest in this. Look, I've got a ringside seat on this, and I'm as frustrated and impatient about this as anyone. And it's taking too long. I accept that. I think COVID genuinely had an impact on the process, but the process takes too long, and there are too many people that need to be involved, too many consultations and so forth. But all I can say is that I hope, as a result of all this work that's gone into it, involving sort of looking at the highways, looking at education, all the ecology, that we will end up with an absolutely first-class development at the end of it, and it'll be worth the wait. It had better be. That's all I can say. There is a clear vision. There's a very clear vision that we're going to build something that the people who live in Manydown and the borough as a whole will be incredibly proud of. I think that we can fairly ask the development manager, Mr. Coppell, tonight to give us a bit more detail. That's what I'm looking for in relation to timetable and so forth, and on the planning strategy. Because at the end of the day, we brought them in because they're the people who are experts in delivering major schemes, complicated schemes like Manydown, and building them to a very high standard, and that was the whole point, and that's the measure we will apply to them as our partners, 50-50 partners with Manydown North. So I'm not ducking it at all. I accept a lot of the criticism you're making, but I do everything I possibly can, as does Councillor Rattigan and the rest of and the officer team, to get this moving as quickly as possible.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Lee. I've noted your comments, and when we have Urban and Civic speaking to us later on, we can mention some of those to them as well and hear what they have to say. So thank you for your contribution. Could I invite Miranda Chubb, please, to come and say what she wants to say? 2 minutes, please, Ms. Chubb. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just want to say that as COP26 approaches, it's a real reminder that climate change is arguably the greatest threat we face, and that making urgent changes across the borough to reduce the level of carbon emissions must be our highest priority. It's also our legal obligation to meet the targets of the Paris Climate Agreement and the Climate Change Act, as well as needing to meet our own Basingstoke 2030 net zero target. The science is clear that current action is not delivering the required changes, as carbon emissions are still rising. In fact, the UN has recently advised that carbon emissions are on track to rise by 16% by 2030, rather than falling in half by that time, which is what is needed to avoid catastrophic consequences. We know that any new homes need to be built to net zero standards, and indeed the National Planning Policy Framework states that the planning system should help to shape places in ways that contribute to radical reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. There has been some mention of a Manydown home standard, however, it's not clear what this means. I'm very concerned that Manydown will be built to outdated standards, which will result in increased carbon emissions in our borough now and for the life of these buildings, which are likely to be around for hundreds of years. The Manydown development should take the same approach as the local plan update and be managed through the lens of climate change, with this being the golden thread running throughout the Manydown process. It will also be more cost effective to construct buildings to net zero and passive house standards than it will be to build them to outdated standards and then try and retrofit these buildings afterwards. So we're in a climate emergency. Please, can I just ask for assurance that any new homes built in Manydown will be built to net zero passive house standards, and ideally to carbon positive standards incorporating renewable energy generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Chubb. Thank you. At this stage, Councillor Isaac or one of the officers, do you want to respond, or shall we save that for Urban and Civic? John?
I'm happy to respond in general terms. Again, I appreciate your interest and understand your concerns, Miranda. So thank you again for joining us. Look, I know you're concerned, but I think it's a bit premature to say that we're going to be adopting outdated standards. Any new development is going to give rise to carbon emissions, and I think the objective is to make sure that we minimise those. But we have to do it in a way that enables us to build at a cost that will help us, will mean that we can actually sell the homes at prices that people can afford. I'm quite confident that as the technology evolves, that we will be able to do that, and we'll be able to have a sort of a double win, if you like. We'll have affordable homes and also ones that are at or close to net carbon zero. But there's some good work that I've witnessed going on via our partners at Urban and Civic. So I think that there'll be, it's not complete, and there's, but there'll be an opportunity tonight, I'm sure, for Mr. Coppell to give you some update on the work, and I hope some reassurance about our objectives, which we take incredibly seriously. We have to.
Thank you very much, and thank you again, Miranda. Stay tuned, and obviously we can hear what our partners say later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do any committee members have any questions for officers or for Councillor Isaac and Councillor Rattigan? Oh, I've got I don't know who was first. Councillor James.
Councillor Rattigan was first, so let him go.
Oh, that's very honest of you. Thank you. Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Gavin. I'm grateful. And to Miranda's points, if I may, Chair, I was lucky enough to meet Miranda at an EPH meeting and was very caught up with her passion for the subject. And to be fair, as I was the leader when we confirmed our climate emergency, I think I have a responsibility to make sure that this development is not only to the highest standards now, but is adaptable and sustainable to the highest standards that will roll out through the Environment Bill, which is going through Parliament at the moment, and will become the Environment Act in only a few weeks. So I do think it will be a rolling ball of improvement, ascertaining whether we're doing the right job, so a consideration, and then moving on again if we've got things wrong to drive standards higher and to achieve many of the goals that Miranda and others are moving us into. But these are not things that are being forced upon us. These are things that we want to do as the administration, and I look forward to being able to deliver on her aspirations and our aspirations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. It really builds on the 2 points from questions from members of the public. I'll start with Miranda's first. During his presentation, Councillor Isaac mentioned the phrase tasty returns, which I don't think is really suited to what we're talking about tonight. It shouldn't appear in the Manydown development. I want him to just confirm or reaffirm that we will build Manydown as somewhere great to live, great to grow up, and great to work. But at the same time, we're going to deliver that sustainability. We're also going to make sure that Winkleberry feels like they've got an addition, a bonus, a positive. The positives outweigh the negatives of Manydown being there. And also that Oakley feels safe and protected and keeps its unique identity as a village on the edge of town rather than an estate within the town. Those are absolute priorities, and particularly that sustainability bit. I think if we come out of the Manydown development with a tasty return, but we are leaking CO2, that we don't achieve either positivity, but certainly zero net carbon for that development, then I think we have failed. So I want to reaffirm that we're not in this to make money. We're in this to make great places to live, not just in Manydown, but for the borough supporting it. The second query builds on the comment by Alex Lee. I'm reading, because I'm really sad, Policy SS310, produced in October 2015. It's a statement of common ground between Basingstoke and Deane and Hampshire County Council. Very interesting document, and it does give us some timescales. And by the timescales on that, building should have started in the year 2017-18 with 50 homes being built. It then steps up towards full speed of 320 homes a year next year. So right now we should be 850 homes into the development. We are 0 homes into the development, and we are saying that we're not going to really seize the land until 2022, which is the point at which we should be at 1,490 homes for desperate families in Basingstoke. That's not COVID. Something else has gone seriously wrong. Can we get an answer to what that is?
Councillor Isaacs.
Okay, well, thank you, Councillor James. I would hope that the objective should be to achieve both, and that's good returns and also a sustainable development. And I think it's important that we do look to obtain returns, because it's always been part of the philosophy with Manydown that we would look to reinvest some of the returns and that gives us the opportunity to invest in services for our residents, including those in Winkleberry. So I don't think we should lose sight of that, and it should be possible to do both. Clearly, things like the countryside park and the shopping that's proposed and employment and so forth should be good for the residents of Winkleberry and Buckskin and so forth. I'm not going to sort of start talking about Oakley particularly. That's something that's more about planning and ensuring that there is a gap there, which we're pretty clear as an administration is an important strategic gap. As far as the time that's taken to get to this point, it has taken too long. So I'm not going to suggest otherwise. I think that there are just too many processes that have been involved, too many parties that have been involved. The complications, particularly on highways, caused a great deal of delay, and that's why there are a whole series of reasons why it's taken us longer than it should have done. So I'm not making any. I can't give you any anything other than to say that it's disappointing that it's taking this long, but we are getting there, and we've got a first-class partner on board with us who and we're working very well. I'm pleased to say with our partner, with our fellow council, Hampshire County Council, and so I'm optimistic that that all the work that has been done will pay dividends, because it will be a very well planned development and avoid a lot of the problems that have impacted and made some of the other developments that have gone up more quickly in and around Basingstoke less desirable, and all sorts of problems associated with the homes that have been built. You know, we've always set ourselves a very high standard for Manydown North.
Councillor Rattigan, do you want to feed into the answer?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just to confirm Councillor Isaac's line, I think it is absolutely possible that we have I wouldn't use the term he used, but it would be a good return on our capital that we've invested to replay back into services and to making Basingstoke a great place to live. But it is important that Manydown does not become a carbuncle on the edge of the town, and we need to make sure that the design standards, the quality of life are all good. But the life opportunities that this development will bring in terms of apprenticeships, the delivery of housing, the ongoing benefits, not just financial, because of course there are some intangibles in that. And as Councillor Isaac has pointed out, the fact that the country park will be used not just by the people of Basingstoke, but by the surrounding areas in Kingsclere, my ward, or many other areas from Chinham right through to Old Basing, where people will want to congregate and use that open space. Now, we have seen very clearly through the pandemic that there is a clamour to ensure that nature, that natural environment is accessible to all. And we need to, through design and the implementation of the country park, make sure that all of those things are integral to the delivery of great places to live. I hope that we can do both, and I am sure that we will do both. But it is important that you as the overview committee and we as the administration with our partners make that delivery as good as it can be every day. And I'm sure when we quiz the development manager on this, then we will get an opportunity to say what standards we want in and what questions we've got for him to raise those bars to the highest level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dillo. Oh, yeah. Sorry, did you want to, sorry, could I just interrupt? Do you want to come back on that same question, Councillor James, or is this a new thing?
It was just a supplementary to the question in relation to...
Sorry, Councillor Dillo.
Yeah, sorry. Just in relation to that, you know, I mean, it would be great if we come out with a positive, with more than, you know, we expect. But I think it's just to reassure those residents in the west of Basingstoke. It's very clear from the Policy Committee 1995, I'm sure everyone's read the minutes of that, it was a great one, that it says very clearly in there, should there be any profit, any net surplus to the councils, then this would be shared equally, should there be any. So it's very clear the reason we purchased the land was to make great places to live. And obviously things have moved on, and it's been a lot greener than it would have been if we built it then. Should we make money, that will be shared equally between the councils. I want to make sure that first and foremost, we are going to make sure it's great. If there is surplus money, okay, but we are not going to sacrifice a bit of greatness to get a bit of profit. I think it's really important we make sure that our first priority is to create a great place to live for Manydown and the surrounding areas. If there's profit, that's secondary, and we'd sacrifice profit to make it better. That's what I'm just checking. We've still got our priorities in order.
Chair, do you want me to answer that? I mean, obviously, we have to deliver great housing in a changed environment. Councillor James, obviously the environmental standards now are much higher than they were when we first perceived a development on Manydown. But you can be assured that if we have excess profit, then we can reinvest that in our communities. And I think we need to green many of the other areas of Basingstoke just as much as we need to green Manydown. There is much to do in terms of the quality of boilers, the quality of the urban space. And if we have capital to do that, I think that would be beneficial. We should always look for a profit. If that profit is reduced because of those environmental standards, so be it. But I do think we ought to be aiming for the stars, and even if we just hit the tops of lampposts, at least it's better than not aiming for the top. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My apologies that I was speaking with a muted microphone just now. Does anybody want to come back on that, or shall we move on? Okay, Councillor Dillo.
I just thought, I think in many ways Miranda hit the nail on the head, is that I think what we're hoping for tonight from the officers and the guests is that we get a firm commitment to ensuring that the development is future-proofed, so that we're able to reach the 2030 net zero targets. I think everyone is crying out for specifics and timelines. You know, whether we're going to have a Manydown standard that, you know, includes future-proofing, reduced energy demand, and sustainability, and maybe even things like, you know, using air and ground heat pumps, or solar panels, or on sort of street EV charge points and things like that, so that people have got some sort of direction about where the overall development is going, what tier that's going to appear in. But I think we just need to have some direction about, you know, what's going to happen, because I don't really want Manydown to be full of gas boilers that are going to have to be retrofitted in 20, 30 years time, or even before. So, you know, are we going to be is the Manydown standard going to show that, you know, we're going to be looking forward rather than having to retrofit 10, 15 years down the line?
Thank you very much. I think even I can assure you there won't be any gas boilers, but does Councillor Isaac or Rattigan want to comment on that?
Well, no, I think we'll leave that sort of detail to Richard Coppell, if we may, because he's the one in the driving seat on this, and he's the one who can give you the sort of detail and the reassurance that you're looking for, Councillor Dillo. By the way,
I'm very hopeful that that's what will happen tonight.
I'd be grateful if Councillor James could send me this reference he made. Is it SS3 open brackets 10 close brackets, because I'm not aware of that one, and so before answering him, I should actually have just checked precisely what who it was from and when it was from. But you caught me out there, Councillor James, temporarily. Thank
you. But we were originally going to be expecting houses by now. I do know that much. I'm not quite sure what the timescales were. Yeah. So before we move on to urban and civic, can I, are there any other questions or comments at this stage that anybody would like to make? Just raise your hand, either physically or virtually. Okay. Okay, very good. So I hope this works. It's my pleasure to invite Urban and Civic in the form of David Ainsworth and Richard Coppell to provide us with a presentation. So if you're there, over to you.
We're here, Chair. I hope you can see us now live from our office in the centre of town. So good evening. And,
Thank you. Yes, we see you.
You can
Thank
hear
you.
us loud and clear. So and good evening, councillors. Nice to see you once again. Very pleased to be with you tonight. As you can see, it's a double act this evening. So Richard Coppell, myself, and David Ainsworth will be giving you hopefully a bit more of just an update on where we are on the project, but we'll also be picking up many of the comments. We've been listening intently over the last half an hour or so over some of the comments that councillors have been making and your guest speakers, Alex and Miranda. So we'll be picking up some of those comments throughout our presentation. So, and we can certainly take more questions subject to time. I suppose, may I just start by just saying that from our perspective as your joint venture partner, I think it's fair to say that we share your frustrations and impatience with this project. As a commercial property development business, clearly it will be music to your ears that we are very driven to get into the stage of this project where we can start delivering. So there is absolutely no incentive for us to be dragging our heels. We are full speed ahead on this project. You might not be sensing that. And clearly I can sense that in the conversation and the discussion. You won't be sensing that because you won't be seeing it, but certainly your officers are certainly on that journey with us. And I think it was Alex Lee's comments about the 462 days. I think it's probably worth just reminding committee that we don't have a planning permission on this development yet. We have a resolution to grant planning permission. And since that period, we have been leading the charge on what at times has actually been quite a lengthy negotiation on the Section 106 agreement. And it's good to say that right here and now, we are very close to finalising, and the council as the applicant for the application are very close to finalising the arrangements on the Section 106. And I would certainly hope that by the end of this year, the joint venture and this committee will actually have in its hand a decision notice. So we will have planning permission. So that has been where the lion's share of the effort has been since the contractual arrangements on the joint venture have been concluded. But that's not all we've been doing. We, in parallel to that exercise, which has clearly had to be the focus, because without planning permission, we aren't able to deliver and move on to the next stage. We are now gearing up on all fronts to be in a position that we are starting this project in earnest, and we'll talk about some of the light start we've already made, but actually starting in earnest in spring next year. So we are working incredibly hard in order to achieve that ambition. So I want you all to feel comforted that we have no reason to be dragging our heels. The project is now moving into a delivery phase, and there are some challenges that we face in the short term in terms of business plans, in terms of securing the land, drawing the land down from the landowner, all of those things which we're working intently on in order for us to be in a position that by spring next year that we'll be putting in those entrances, putting in those access ways, lining up housing delivery for this site. So hopefully we'll elucidate a little bit more as we go through these slides. There aren't many slides this evening. We are going to be picking up some of the themes that you've talked about, cycling, country parks. Councillor Isaac earlier extended an invitation that we've made to this committee to come and see one of our schemes. And I'd urge committee to do that, because I would like to demonstrate to you that we believe not only can we achieve a reasonable commercial return from our development activities on these large scale sites, but we can also deliver what we think are first class, best in class new communities. So I think actually by coming to one of our sites, you'll actually see that firsthand. And it's that level of quality that we want to bring down to Manydown. And I've said that consistently, but I think seeing is believing. So actually coming to one of our sites, I think would help you start to actually understand how we go about what we do and the aspiration that we have for Manydown. So I'm confident that we can hopefully allay some of your fears by seeing some of our developments. But without further ado, why don't we take you through where we are at the moment on the project, what the next couple of months look like, the work that we're doing, and some of the emerging thoughts on and the development and the design evolution that we're working hard on in the master plan development and shaping that up for delivery. I mean, the first picture you can see there, which is the first sort of proper intervention on site, which is something we were very keen to do very early to de-risk the project, was the archaeological investigation. So we are pleased that that's happening. Bear in mind, we're doing this at risk. We haven't got that planning permission, but we are on site, scraping the earth, doing that initial phase across the entirety of the site. And I think there are going to be something like, David, you'll correct me, 400 of these trenches.
More like 1,000.
More like 1,000 of these trenches across the site. So it's a thorough archaeological investigation. We will then be taking samples of those where there's interesting. And I understand from the specialists, although I can't quite get excited by it, but I understand by the people that know that that brown semicircular scrape that you see is a sign of activity. And to archaeologists, that's interesting. So we'll be digging out that trench and actually investigating that more in due course. But it's important that we do this work so that we can actually clear off the archaeological hurdle, get archaeology out the way, so that clears the way for delivery in spring next year. So I want you to have that in your mind. David, do you want to take us through the next few slides, and we'll work through together?
We haven't got many, but we will also equally try to go through them quite quickly. So really, this slide is just covering off some of those other elements of work which we need to put in place to enable us to be on site early next year. So what we're covering off here is the fact that, as Richard says, by the spring, we like to think we'll be on site undertaking access junctions, and ahead of that, we can actually go on. So the key three elements here is planning. As Richard says, we have a resolution to grant, which we secured last year, and we're now very close to moving that to a full consent with Section 106 and conditions being agreed. And I think my understanding is that something which will probably land in a few weeks' time in early November. The other thread, of course, is drawing together the business plans, which is a large task for a site of this size and for this duration of the project. But we're beginning to work through the elements. We'll be able to give you sort of we call it a sneak preview into some of the design work which is happening in terms of evolving the master plan and strategy and phasing of delivery, which we'll show later to you. And also we'll be able to talk to some of the elements of quality and the Manydown standard and the elements which we wish to hold ourselves to as a joint venture delivering the schemes. And we'll talk about some of that towards the end of this presentation, particularly around carbon. The other element, of course, which we are moving forward as we move through the commercial model for Manydown is moving towards the acquisition of the site itself. The council, obviously being long lease holders, we need to exercise their option to take the freehold and sort of put in place the final sort of important tenants to delivery. If we move on to the next slide,
I think it's worth saying that none of this work that we're doing, and indeed on this slide as well, we're doing in isolation. So we're inviting council officers, some are here tonight, as part of the design workshops. So they are witnessing the move, the transition from a very outlined sketch phase to that detail to enable us to progress. So we're taking your officers through that journey with us.
And we just wanted to show you some of the activity which is happening now on site and will be happening over the next few months, to the point made earlier on this evening around the serving notice on the farm business tenancy across the site. We don't have to wait until the expiry of the 12 months. We have the ability to enter site under license, and we can do that, and we are doing that. So at this moment in time, with 1,000 trenches for archaeology being dug across the site, the farming has ceased on those elements, and we'll take the opportunity to do as much of the activities to sort of maintain the programme ahead of all the other moves being in place as we can. So little shot there, as you can see, the archaeology, they'll probably be on site now to the end of the year, working through their trenching. This is the first stage. These trenches are backfilled, and then in due course, any areas and sites found will be stripped back and recorded in future. Also happening ongoing is ecology, with surveys on site at present this week. We will continue to keep the site surveys up to date and develop the information we need as we move into the next level of detail for planning. Hopefully around December, January, we'll get on site to do further ground investigation. We want to understand sort of bearing loads and infiltration rates to help with the sort of detailed design. So that work will happen over, or ending, say, around February. Then very importantly, bottom right, to ensure that we can be on site with those access junctions in the spring next year, there's work to be done to take the sort of what will be consented drawings for those sites to actually get highways approval and technical design. So that work has begun already. We've commenced that, and only this week, I think a pack has been sent over to Hampshire, where we're talking now about road speeds with the traffic regulation orders to understand what speed reductions we can achieve on elements like Roan Road and Worthing Road, to sort of bring them to a speed which is more appropriate for the development. And that, by settling that, we can then move to the actual junction designs themselves, because the design of the junctions will speak to the speeds which we have. So that piece of work is underway, and we're hoping to have that finished and completed, say, March next year, to allow the work to commence.
Yeah, I think for me, the critical path of this programme runs through highway design. Our experience across our now 7 active sites of this scale across the country is highways design and technical approval is unfortunately the slowest cog to move. And for that reason, we are hitting that early. And we certainly hope and aspiration is that by the end of this year, we'll be out into the contracting market to be pricing up those first access junctions, which we can show you on a plan shortly. So I want to be out in the market talking to, in fact, we're already talking to contractors, but I want that formal process to be starting at the end of the year. It has to, in order for us to be on site in spring. But that technical approval process clearly is out with the district's control. That's clearly sitting with highways, with county highways. So we're really dependent on that process running smoothly. But we are hitting it early, and we're getting on with it. And actually, happy to report so far, famous last words, but the conversations and the workshops that we're having with Hampshire on the detail thus far have been productive and positive. But don't hold me to that.
Well, they have been, that we can say.
Yeah.
And then the final part on there, I think maybe coming back to Mr. Lee's comments earlier on this evening, another element which we are looking to move forward while we wait the full consent is to start work on the next tier, which is the site-wide framework. So the technical and the design team are, as we speak, working on those, making sure that they'll be ready for submission early after receiving consent. That obviously requires liaison and communication with the LPA in due course, but we're looking forward to doing that. What I should point out is that, yes, there's this tiered consent with the site wanted essentially providing more detail on the site as a whole, followed by phases. But what we also have is a structure which allows us to bring forward key pieces of infrastructure early. So what is right to do is work through the detail of these large sites and make sure that the detail comes forward as we move forward through phases. What we also want to be able to do is make sure the delivery continues, and we have that ability to bring forward access junctions and other key pieces of infrastructure. So that will be happening alongside. I think move on slides. Richard, you want to?
You pick up and I'll.
Yeah. So what we have here is really just some of the imageries around how the master plan's evolving and how we're working through the more detailed elements, thinking about where to commence development. We're thinking about how the access works, thinking about some of the elements of the main street, the interfaces of the existing communities. And here, this is rather diagrammatic, which is just taking almost a parameter plan view of the site, which you have seen before. And if you move to the next slide, you'll see.
Well, I think just one of the things I would just pick up on this, and sorry for the abbreviation. So KP1 is our terminology for key phase 1. So we split the first phase into 2, A and B. And the reason we've done this, and I don't think this was originally envisaged when sort of Manydown North was conceived, certainly not in the application. But one of the things that we like to do as a business, and this goes to housing delivery and the speed of housing delivery, is open up a number of fronts at the same time. So where we have been most successful in our schemes is where we have been able to open up 2 fronts simultaneously. So that for that reason, and this scheme lends itself very well to enable us to do that, which is why we've got key phase 1A and B. The reality is we'll be doing them at the same time. And the junctions that you can see, there are 3 junctions, 1 on key phase 1A and 2 in key phase 1B. We'll be doing those pretty much at the same time because we want to get into those phases, put the green infrastructure in, open the sites up and get housing delivery as quickly as we can. So we're not looking at doing this in a very sequential step-by-step way. We're looking to really drive housing delivery in a very high quality way, and we can come on to that, but drive fast absorption as much as we can. So this site actually helps us in being able to do that.
Yeah. I think if we could just move to the next slide, you can see that to Richard's point, we've been moving forward with the detail. So here, what we're showing is some of the further thinking about how that first phase might look. And what you have is, say, on the eastern side, opposite Winkleby Way, is phase 1A, and over to the west, where the roundabout and signalised junction on near Worthing, we have 1B. And these 2 elements, in our mind, commercially, setting up 2 fronts enables us to have that absorption to get to Councillor James. His numbers of over 300 units a year absorption as an assumption, something which we want to work towards achieving at Manydown. By having those 2 fronts, we can have enough house builders to enable that to be achieved. And that's what those 2 fronts achieve, but they also are linked together in 2 ways. One, in the north, by joining these through the Countryside Park, and along the southern edge of Manydown, you'll see something which we refer to as School Walk, and therefore ensures that the facilities which are being built in one side are accessible from the other and joining this whole scheme together. I think in terms of those facilities, what you'll see here and on the eastern side is the first of the primary schools, and further to the north, where the Country Park Hub, we will hope to bring forward in there some further community facilities, community building, a nursery, and all the other elements.
As you can see, the first phase not only includes those 2 elements I've been referring to, 1A and 1B, but it also includes the park. So the red line wraps around the park. So we see that as an absolutely fundamental piece, and we want to. That's not an afterthought. That needs to be part of the first phase. So we want to. Not only do we want to maintain accessibility to that countryside during development, but we want it to be available for the very first residents. That's very much part of this development. It's the defining feature. So the green corridors, the fingers you can see, is a characteristic of this scheme that you will see on as the master plan develops. What I hope you can see also from this image is the level of detail that we are now progressing with this scheme. So whilst you can see detailed housing layouts here, I'd just say that those probably aren't the housing layouts that are going to be delivered. But what we're doing is we're starting to test densities, building typologies, plotting locations to make sure that everything works, that the infrastructure works, the drainage works, the green corridors through those spaces, people's accessibility to green and nature is optimized at all times. So we're really doing a lot of testing and proving. As you can see, there's a lot more detail, hopefully, than you've ever seen before.
I think we have just a few more visuals and images of what that might look like, bringing that to life. So this is actually a view from the eastern side at phase 1A. What you're looking out over here is the first of the parks of Manydown. This is the access junction off Roman Road and Winkleby Way. And what you see there is what we try to achieve in many of our sites is make quite a statement as the opening to the piece to set the tone of what we're trying to achieve. And as Richard was just saying, in terms of principles which we've been developing and evolving, I think Councillor Isaac referred to earlier on, that developing a place in harmony with nature is one of them. And actually, by starting with a strong statement of open space and green space, and then connecting it for those fingers through to the park, that we straight from the get-go draw in that sort of naturalistic approach of design and place, which we're trying to achieve.
And cycling will be at the very heart. So I know Alex Lee mentioned earlier the cycling and the accessibility through to Worthing. That is absolutely at the heart of this scheme. And yet you can see some people on bikes in this image. But the majority of the pathways will have their own cycleways adjacent, and they will be running through not only school walk, linking the first two elements of the phases together, but also through the entrances across Winkelbury Way and Roman Road into the scheme. So cycling's at the heart of this, absolutely.
We should say actually that those two cyclists, rather than just being indicative on the bottom right-hand side, are actually crossing the route which will strengthen to the town centre. So part of the outline consent is the strengthening of the walking and cycling route, which starts at Winkelby Way and then leads its way into the town centre.
The other point, perhaps just to note, probably difficult to see, but the intention is that we create some green breathing space. Not only is this space for recreation, but to set back the housing to create an interesting scene, but also is what we didn't want is the residents of Worthing looking onto a wall of housing. So the housing is set back and there is a green corridor that actually runs up, going away from this image up Roman Road. Yeah.
So I think we call it linear park, and you can see the splashes of blue as it's used for sustainable drainage, as well as actually a place of amenity opposite Winkelbury. I think there's one more image of the park shown a little further into the site, really just to add a little bit more structure to what you're seeing here, looking at a courtesy crossing. There's another element of the road design. One of the things we'd like to do in terms of setting the sort of tone of the place is, rather than actually relying on a series of signalised junctions to control traffic throughout the scheme, is actually generating a route through it where a slower but steady pace can be achieved as you go through the scheme. So using devices like a courtesy crossing to slow down the cars without necessarily stopping traffic. That way we maintain the same levels of through flow which is required and to meet the sort of technical requirements of the scheme, but doing it in a far more sort of harmonious way with people living in the scheme.
You'll see in what we call the common, it's not named, but we call it the common, you'll see there's a playground. We think we're probably one of the best in the business of putting in playgrounds, not only early, but also to the very highest quality. And I think if you came to one of our sites, you would see that firsthand. We pride ourselves in the quality of facilities for residents. That would be in very early.
Oh, and then this image is just an indicative shot from talking about that creating a place in harmony with nature, these green fingers which pull you into the country park and I think actually, again, a comment from Mr. Lee, the actual country park is defined, it's on the parameter plan, the boundary of it, that is known, but all these fingers work their way down north, south, pulling in the people through to the park from neighbouring communities and the site itself. I think, and
I think just the other thing to say on this image is, you know, preparing images like this is very easy, isn't it? But do you believe them? Well, again, if you were to come to see how we operate and how we install trees and green infrastructure, I think you would, because we're a strong believer in installing mature trees at a very early stage. And this lush landscape is actually fairly common across our developments. So this is not a figment of our imagination. This I hope will be reality, as this is the path leading us up to the country park. So
I think next we've got, I think we move on now to
carbon.
To the carbon. So going full circle to what we were saying earlier on, part of finalising that business plan between us and understanding the quality standards, we've been working through elements of that work. We are meeting in a week or two to actually go through what we hope will be our new sustainability and quality standard for the scheme. One element we have already been able to talk about at length as a joint venture together is our approach to carbon and that element of sustainability. So I think we're able now to start revealing where we're heading in terms of our thinking. I know that Basingstoke Transition Network and Miranda will be happy to see that we've very much listened and share the opinions of what we need to do. What we have here is 3 areas which we are focusing on, starting with, I think, where the narrative is often at, around the operational energy and the carbon output related to that. And I think what we want to do here is, in relation to sort of regulated energy use of all elements of the scheme, we want to, from the get-go, establish a net zero target. So this will be from commencement to the sort of life cycle of these schemes. For regulated operational energy, we want to aim to have net zero. In terms of the process and the detail of how we'll achieve that, there is a slide coming which we'll cover off and go through some of our thinking. But we certainly know the moves we wish to make to achieve that. Sticking in the same sort of topic area of operational energy, we would like in due course to draw into that the unregulated energy use, to make sure that all operational energy is net zero. And I think on that point, we probably need to see the development of the sort of regulated element and the timing, the decarbonisation of the grid and many other things to see when the right time to bring that is. But the ambition is to do it as soon as humanly possible. Of course, there is then a third element to our thinking around carbon strategy. We're talking about embodied or capital carbon on these schemes. And on that, I think that there is an element that it is a very meaningful contribution of carbon to development of places. And therefore, it is a topic which we need to come up with solutions. We are developing those. There is an element of, at the moment, reliant on innovation in terms of the grid, in terms of decarbonisation of the power grid, to see whether the materials currently being used, the carbon output to those. But that is very much on the radar. And picking up a point made this evening, this is a dynamic piece. We won't know today the answers to all elements and to solve all problems, and nor will we fix the one solution and stick to this for the next 10 to 15 years. We need to be evolving this as we move forward. As new technologies come online, as new opportunities arrive, we need to keep readdressing this and raising the standard of what we can achieve, but keep pushing. So if I may, we'll just move on to just covering off that first sort of commitment, just going through some of the moves, as it were, we'd like to make to sort of achieve that. So again, a point made earlier on, I think by Chair and Councillor Dillo, in terms of gas. So with Manydown, we have a huge opportunity of putting in the infrastructure to commence, and we, in our minds, do not need to put gas into this scheme. We need to go all electric from the get-go. One of the problems with the gas supply is obviously it's not decarbonising. It can't decarbonise. It is gas. You are ultimately burning fossil fuel. So moving away from that that energy type and fuel type for housing is paramount to actually being able to reach net zero. You won't be able to do it if you don't. So that is a first move and a commitment to not have gas, to move to electricity. And what's important, therefore, about being on electricity is we are essentially attaching Manydown to the really impressive work which has been undertaken by the National Grid to reduce the carbon intensity of power production. If you look at the projections, leading the way projections from the National Grid, you actually see that they believe they could be carbon neutral as early as, I think, early 2030s, 2035. And if they can, and there are, someone mentioned it earlier on this evening, it might be Miranda, about actually being carbon positive, where they're actually reversing some of the work. So being all electric joins us to that story, which is important. The next move would be about reducing the amount of energy which you use. It's all well and good that in the future the electricity might not come with a carbon attached to it, but in the short term it will. So we have to ensure that the homes we're building are using less energy and therefore creating less carbon. So that's reducing this energy usage intensity. Now, to date, most houses are built to a standard which is Part L, probably established back in 2012, 13, I think, and haven't really moved along. Most of the carbon reduction attached to houses in that period is a result, again, of decarbonisation of the grid rather than an increase in standards. So what we would like to do is adopt early the Future Home Standard, which is coming in 2025. The Future Home Standard is quite a step change in the energy use intensity of homes. You might say that something of the order of 75% reduction in energy use intensity between the Part L today and what Future Home Standard does on its way to what others here I know would like to see, which is passive house. So what Future Home Standard will do is will take you most of the way to achieving the energy intensity of passive house. What's great about that is that will be a requirement of all homes and all buildings in the UK, meaning that actually the costs involved in upgrading U values to windows, doors, and materials will actually become efficient because of the economics and economies of scale by all suppliers having to meet these new standards. Meaning that in terms of maintaining the sort of viability and balancing the demands on the scheme, that is something we're supportive of because it will be adopted by all house builders. What we find is when you are pushing beyond what the market is expecting by going beyond the standard, it is disproportionately expensive. So therefore, it's not our preferred choice. We want to use other opportunities within our control to achieve this net zero. So then moving on to others, which that might be. In terms of heating, if we're not using gas, we need low carbon heating solutions to heat homes and heat the water. We don't need to be prescriptive to the market. The assumption today, the working assumption would be the use of air source heat pumps. But again, there's an example of a technology which currently is considered very expensive. But actually, with the introduction of Future Home Standard in the future, we should expect to see that technology become much more affordable, more efficient because of the innovation rising.
All the house builders now are signing up deals, partnership arrangements with the likes of Hitachi and others to pre-buy mass production air source heat pumps and the like. So they're already looking in this direction because they have to. So I'm hoping that we're already seeing our house building partners on other schemes adopting this technology. It's a bit slow, but Manydown will be that it'll be from the get-go.
So that really covers the left-hand side, and in many ways you might describe those as carbon producers. Even your heat pump still needs energy to be run. It might overall provide savings. So in terms of getting back to that net zero and balancing, we obviously need to provide negatives to the calculation. Our thinking is on-site generation. The initial modelling we have done to understand whether we believe we can achieve this, we've made an assumption of a fairly modest PV covering on roofs of 15%. And if we can achieve on-site generation equivalent to that with our house builders and on the scheme, on the buildings we produce ourselves, we'll be able to offset much of the carbon generated by the homes. Certainly in the first early years, while the carbon intensity is still quite high on using energy. And then to the extent that there is a residual which needs to be balanced, then we will look to use on-site sequestration. here in particular, other schemes and other developers may be using payments to carbon offsets and carbon innovation funds. Our actual preference is to take advantage and make a virtue of the approach we're making. We're trying to develop a place in harmony with nature. We have open spaces on the development land of over 140 acres. And that's before we consider the sort of countryside park with another 250 acres. What we're trying to say here is that there's a real opportunity to plant trees and take other actions which sort of sequester carbon back into the ground to balance that sum. So I think with those 5 different moves, we're quite confident that we will be able to achieve that net zero, certainly initially with regulated operational and in due course, unregulated as well. And hopefully, again, some of those sequestration elements will be part of our story around embodied or capital carbon costs. I think that's on the slide.
I think, Chair, I think that's
the end of the presentation.
we sort of laboured on. We spent a lot of time on carbon because I know that it was a key part of some of your guests' questions and comments and councillors. So we did labour that somewhat, but hopefully that has gone some way to answering some of those queries that people had in their mind. So I mean, at that point, we'll take any questions, and we're in your hands, Chair.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting, and I found it quite encouraging. I think I'd say I'm particularly encouraged by your phrase, "We're full speed ahead on this." That's music to all of our ears. So thank you for that. And yes, thank you for all the stuff that you said about carbon neutrality. It makes me very grateful that we've got a Basingstoke Transition Network who are passionate about carbon neutrality and informed. And I believe you're meeting with them next month, aren't you? So they'll be able to obviously give you the 3rd degree, which they no doubt will. But it's good to know that they're there and they're on the ball as they are. And thank you for agreeing to meet with them. That will be really, really useful. So we do have some hands up. Can I ask Councillor Freeman, what would you like to say?
There we go. First of all, I'd like to say, with especially with regards to the future proofing and the carbon zero, it's very, very promising. It's also good to see that you're taking the vision for the land north of the M3 at Junction 7 into account for Manydown South, but are you taking into account the Winklebury regeneration with the planning for Manydown North? Also, you spoke about the speed which you're delivering this. One thing that I know Winklebury residents are very concerned about is how long, if at all, the construction traffic is going to be routed down Roman Road. They would prefer not at all. I believe Alex Lee also touched on this. There are on Kenilworth Road, the only way in and out of Kenilworth Road is Roman Road. It's going to cause a massive disruption for people along there. And also, as Alex said, the rat running down through Elmwood Way and the Clark Estate and also down Tiverton Road. Is there any way we can work on timescales? And can you give me assurances that it will be the shortest possible time that construction traffic is routed down Roman Road, if at all?
Shall I pick up the first point, Chair, around Winklebury? And
yes,
then
over to you. Yes,
can you do construction? Yeah. So on Winklebury, the short answer is yes, we are. We are already, I mean, like the carbon engagement we had with all those many groups, we are engaging with all parish councils, local amenity groups and local action groups. So we are in dialogue with Winklebury residents group. We've met with them 2, maybe 3 times now. I'd just like to reassure the committee that for us, engagement with groups like that and communities like that is very important for us. Manydown is a 10-year project. We're not here today, gone tomorrow. So actually relationships in the community, making sure that we dovetail with other projects and other activities in the community that surround Manydown and beyond is very important to us. So we have already employed our sort of community development lead, and alongside David, who is day-to-day running this project, we are out in the community making sure that we are fostering those relationships and understanding those needs and making sure that we don't just turn our back, but we make sure that we dovetail our activities with the wider community. So hopefully that gives you some confidence that we are making sure that we listen. We may not be able to deal with all challenges that we face because some of them will just be insurmountable, but we are listening and we will do our best to work with communities.
Fantastic.
David, just on construction.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Freeman. I think just on the construction, just to cover off some of the elements, going back to the point Richard has made around something, we will address things the best we can, but not all things can be solved. And here's an example of something where it's unavoidable. I think the construction traffic coming to site, we know that, to your point around route running, that actually providing a routing will likely use the ring road at the A339. So we will be directing for our transport plans construction traffic to use that routing to Manydown. At that point, the only access we have to the site, because we are unable to use the A339, is the Roman road. So it's slightly unavoidable that the only road to providing access to the scheme is the Roman road. So transport will come down it. In terms of timings, the length of time which it's used, of course, we'll be seeking to minimise how long the impact is in that spot. And one of the elements of Manydown is the fact that it's long ribbon, which will, with the main street coming probably halfway through, and when that's there, then we can look at how we route the construction traffic. So again, like many things on the scheme, it's not static. There won't be one solution which starts at the commencement and never moves. At some point, and you have to forgive me, Councillor Freeman, I can't name when exactly at this moment in time that main street will connect in 7 years' time, say, and the strategy changes. But in the near term, we'll have to use Roman Road. What we're seeking to do is make sure that the construction traffic enters onto the site as early as it can to reach the areas it needs to ensure that it minimises the impact. And of course, we'll be looking to use all the management tools available to us to make sure that the impact on the community is minimised.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Dillo.
Yeah, just following on from what Councillor Freeman was saying about the construction traffic, it obviously makes common sense that that the construction traffic would be excluded during peak times. Is that obviously going to be, sort of from the outset? Obviously, things like the school runs and things like that. We don't want everyone doing the school runs sort of stuck behind large vehicles going in and out of the development. I must say I was quite impressed about the way that the houses are set back off Roman Road to sort of mitigate the impact of new houses, and I'm hoping that will stay that way. With the KP1A, the first area, have you any idea how many houses are in that area, the density? And I noticed that there was the area for the primary school in that area. So have you any idea of when that will be built? Thank you.
Yeah, go on.
So I pick this up. Thank you, Councillor Dillo. So in terms of numbers and density, the phase 1A in the east, the number of units I think on there is just over 620, I believe, is the sort of working assumption. That's density of about 13 dwellings an acre, which is relatively, I wouldn't say it's light, but it's certainly not overly dense. It's quite loose, reflecting the sort of nature we're trying to achieve. And then when it comes to the school, as the timing requirements for the Section 106, the school needs to come online for 400 occupations. And of course, that'll be occupations coming forward in the east and in the west. So maybe when 200 homes are occupied opposite Winkleby, that school will be coming online. And in terms of commencing the work for the school, the school will, or the design work will probably have to happen shortly after entering consent because of the time that the window to effectively design it, procure it, and deliver it is relatively not tight, but there isn't a lot of leisure in that time frame and program. So I think you'll see the school development quite quick in the scheme.
We would on our other schemes we've actually delivered schools ourselves, so it's a slightly unusual situation for us here, where Hampshire have much more control in terms of the delivery of the schools. I think it's fair to say that our preference would have been for slightly earlier delivery, and certainly our other schemes we've delivered primary schools almost before any occupation, which is a challenge, but we like to see that infrastructure, then that social infrastructure and education is part of that in our schemes as early as we can possibly deliver it. So that's certainly the intention from here, but Hampshire have sort of set the rules there, if you like, and it's 400 homes.
Yeah. I should also just add, though the school will be open or sort of arrive early, it will only open with one form of entry with a view that it builds the number of students coming to it as the development comes forward. So the two work in tandem.
Thank you very much. Okay, is that okay, Sean? Councillor Compton-Burnett, what do you want to say?
Hello. Firstly, I thought it was very encouraging. Lots of really good things coming forward in the project, so thank you. I wanted to ask about infrastructure, specifically community infrastructure. I've been very happy to hear about your emphasis on building a community of people, not just of buildings. And so I wanted to know, what are your plans for community buildings in key phase 1A and 1B?
Yeah, thank you. In terms of buildings in particular, just the physical form, what we have will come forward in the first phase is the first of 3 community buildings across Manydown. So that will be a building, well, in terms of location, we'd like to put that opposite Winklebury in 1A. We'd like to actually, we're working through the detail, but in terms of location, we're keen to put this into the Country Park hub with a view that we begin to sort of draw people up into the sort of natural asset of the parkland and these sort of the existing buildings there, reuse and opportunity to add some character. But that building there will be about 5,000 square feet, and also most likely sit along buildings which we'd like to bring, which are to support the park. So in addition to bring forward what's required in terms of a community building, we'd like to bring forward a cafe, a sort of an ability for people to visit the park and use those facilities. So what we're imagining is a small collection of buildings, so that there's a sort of centre there early on the scheme. And then in addition to sort of community buildings in terms of wider, we also would like to provide a nursery. I think we need to be marketing a nursery opportunity within the first few hundred homes. And again, we'd look to either locate that there or perhaps in the west of the scheme. But there's another building which come forward. Of course, it's not just buildings, I should say, that we've also got on board already communications and partnerships manager who's already on board at Manydown. And for the first occupation, we'll be strengthening the team with additional hires who they can help sort of bring together the communities as they arrive and work and sort of develop relationships with the communities already there, which I think we've already begun, as Richard referred to earlier.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just ask about 1B? So you've talked about community building on phase 1A. What's going on 1B?
So we've got 2 more community buildings to provide over the lifetime of the scheme. What we'd like to do is provide a second one over it in the area of 1B. I think whether that is above the north of the Worthing Road or south of the Worthing Road, to again co-locate it with wider facilities in terms of sports and this indoor sports facility, our preference, I think, is to combine those. So in terms of timing, that will come forward, I think, around the second phase of the scheme.
But it's important, Councillor, to remember that the 1A and 1B are linked. Whilst the physical Main Street highway will come later, there is school walk. So there's a walk and a dedicated cycle route that actually joins those two phases that we'll be installing very early on. So those two phases, or two elements of the first phase, are linked so that you're not divorced from that new community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of themes, if you like, questions. The first one, to say thank you for your presentation. It is reassuring, definitely, that you're looking at this net carbon zero. And at last, we're talking the language I think we all want to hear. So thank you for that. On that front, though, if we do come to see your representative sites, are you able to show us sort of your approach to zero carbon on those sites? Is the first bit. And actually on zero carbon, we did talk at one time about potentially sort of district heating, ground source heat pump, some sort of community generation scheme. Are you thinking along those lines? That's my first topic.
So shall I pick up the last bit? The combined community heating generation, we haven't ruled anything out, I'd say, to start with. My experience of those is they're very challenging from an economic perspective, very challenging indeed. I would hazard a guess that it will not be economic here because we haven't got the density of population to share the heat, and we haven't got the density. You need a broader mix of uses to share. If you're producing heat to share in a residential community, it's quite challenging. You've also got the challenge of how you actually, what's the energy source for that? Are you bringing in sustainable material? So you've got traffic issues there. Are you using electricity? You've got lots of different challenges around combined heat and power, whether that's sustainable or not. And I think we will be challenged here on the economics of that. But look, we've not ruled anything out. We're on a journey here to find the very best solution for this project and a journey towards net zero. So, but I'm just giving you a heads up. I wouldn't be convinced that it would be the right solution for this development. David might be able to elucidate more on that.
I was only going to add to it in the sense that we have looked at it. We've run more than a slide rule. So beyond sort of the economic arbitration on that, there's also the budget, the carbon budget attached to it. If you look at the whole life carbon associated to a district scheme on a site of this size, I'm not sure that actually will achieve what we need. And I think we can achieve what we want to achieve by using this generation of energy at the house. So going back to Councillor Tomlin's statement, air source heat pumps is one of the low carbon energy routes which we'll have to deploy if we don't have gas on scheme. So I think we're going to get to the same place, but probably using slightly different means.
And just to pick up your point, Councillor, on our other schemes, I think it's fair to say that they haven't reached that aspiration. They were conceived in a different time. So I'm not going to pull your wool over your eyes on that. The reason I would like you to see those is really to benchmark the quality and particularly biodiversity, access to green spaces, and quality of design and implementation. They don't meet the mark of net zero. So, for instance, none of our sites have, they all have gas at the moment. So this is the first site that would be electric only. So we as a business are on that journey too. So I think it's fair to say that they would not meet your aspirations.
Okay, thank you. Chair, if I may, just the very last quick point. Commenting on your phasing 1A, 1B, quite a few houses there. Public transport, how are you getting on with mass transit systems? And I didn't sort of see any routes. It was very difficult to see, but any sort of travel corridors, that type of thing, as was talked about at one time. And also, when those people have moved in there, and yes, there may or may not be schools, where are they going to go shopping? Or are we assuming everybody's going to be online? You know, those how are you dealing with early provision of those sort of infrastructure facilities?
Buses.
Yeah, you could do buses.
So if it, just pick up public transport for you though, I think in that early phase where we have the 600 homes in the east and a similar number in the west, I think the solution, which is actually being led by Hampshire will be providing the improved public transport solution. The idea is to use the existing public bus network to expand the number of buses on it to increase the frequency, because it already runs down Roman Road, which will be accessible to the scheme. It's as it obviously flanks it, and the same on Worthing Road. So that will get us through the first phase, and then as Main Street comes online in the second phase, the solution for public transport will then change again and bring a bus route through the actual scheme, and that will happen throughout. I think with mass rapid transport, there isn't at the moment a mass rapid transport solution in Manydown North. I understand if Manydown South joins, it's something which will be reviewed then to include that through the scheme.
Just picking up the point about shopping. Yes, we need shops because people need to go and buy, if nothing else, a pint of milk. So we would be looking to bring convenience retail into the scheme as soon as we can. Again, it all goes down to the kind of fundamental philosophy of making sure that the residents have amenities. So whether that's access to green space or whether that's access to a pint of milk, it's really important. I mean, ultimately, we're trying to sell homes here. So in order to do that, we have to provide amenity for our residents. Otherwise, it becomes much more of a less attractive place, and that's not what we're interested in. So, you know, we've had arrangements across our sites where we've done transactions with well-known national retailers for convenience stores, and we've also done community stores as well with local post office traders who want to actually who have an entrepreneurial spirit and want to set up shop on our sites too. So we've done a mixture of those, all of them being very successful, and you know, nothing is off the table for Manydown. So, but we'd like to do it early if we can.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Freeman again.
Thank you. More again on infrastructure. What about things like GP surgeries? Is that, you know, are there plans for GP surgery, a building for a GP surgery, or is that down to someone else?
You pick it up, I'll come in on it.
So the Section 106 agreement addresses the provision for health services. At the moment, as I understand it, there are plans as part of the Winklebury regeneration to improve the health service in the area. And I think that CCG, when they were commenting on the Manydown application, made reference to essentially wanting to reserve a position at Manydown depending on what happens in the wider Western Basingstoke area. So what we've done is we've structured the Section 106 to allow for that, where effectively when the development reaches a certain level of progression, we'll begin a review process to ensure that there is sufficient access to health facilities for the residents of Manydown. To the extent that the solution has arrived elsewhere, then that review will not trigger the requirement for a solution. But if it does, that the site's committed to then providing a strategy for how it would address any under-provision in the area. So at the moment, there's no expectation that one will be provided, but there is a mechanism to ensure that if it's required, it can come forward.
It would bring me great joy if we could actually lure a GP surgery onto one of our sites. I'll put my hands up. We have not succeeded across 7 sites to secure a GP surgery. All of them have obligations, plus or minus, to provide facilities. We'd be delighted to do it, but trying to navigate through the labyrinth of the NHS and the clinical commissioning groups now being renamed is difficult and challenging. But the reason I'm follically challenged is because it's more than a challenge. But I'd be delighted to pull it off at Manydown if we can.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dillo.
Yeah, obviously, you reassured us that the country park is in the first phase. I'm just wondering how soon you think that the people of Winklebury will be able to benefit from the country park.
So I start. I think with the park, I think what we have there is a very mature area already, which is fantastic. So in many situations where we're starting with developing new parks, we might be having to establish it from less strong bones, should we say. The park is already open with public rights of way through it. Our intention is, as the current tenant ends farming on that land, is to make sure we open up to the greatest extent we can from the get-go. Now, of course, there will be practical issues of how do you actually improve access to it. So access to it through the first phase will have to come in stages as we work through the sort of physical development. But other areas where we have public rights of way connecting to the country park, we intend to maintain and keep open to the greatest extent we can. So therefore, the community can actually access that area. And also, in my mind, it's really an element of not so much when do we open up the park, but actually more what areas of the park will we have to close off while we make our interventions, and making sure that this extent of those interventions are such that we're not prejudicing people's ability to enjoy what's there already.
Thank you very much. There's just one more hand left. Councillor Compton-Burnett.
Thank you. You mentioned establishing suitable drainage. I just wanted to check that your plans are based on up-to-date water cycle study results, or at least the raw data that went into it.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Have we got any more questions for Urban and Civic? Please raise it. Oh, Councillor James.
Unusually, I haven't got a question, so I want to thank Urban and Civic for their presentation, because I've actually nothing to moan about right now. I will rewatch this on the webcast several times. I'll write to you, but right now I have nothing to moan about, and it's not often that happens. So well done.
Excellent. We've passed the test. Thank you.
That's just great news. Can we minute that, please? That's a first. So I'm assuming that there are no more questions for you, gentlemen. So can I just thank you so much? That was a really encouraging and clear and comprehensive presentation for us all to be getting on with.
Our pleasure.
And we'll be asking ourselves about the visit to Rugby, but obviously we'll let you know that. But it'd be really nice to see some of your previous work. So thank you, Richard and David. You can stay or go, but we've hardly got any more to do now for this meeting, and we're really grateful to you. Thank you very much.
We will sign off. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So before we move on, committee, to the recommendations, have you all made all the comments that you want to make? Are there any more comments or even questions, so that we've covered everything that we feel we should? Good. In that case, we've just got the two recommendations, the usual ones. One is to note the progress made in the Manydown report. That's noted, everyone, yes? Thank you. And the other is, obviously, our job is to review and provide comments on the content of the report, which will be feeding into the next meeting of the Manydown Executive Committee. I'm confident that officers have taken down all your comments, which were very wide-ranging. I think we talked about welcoming the carbon zero aim, construction traffic. We all want the absolute minimum time that Roman Road will be used for access. There was comments about community buildings, the importance of sense of community there. Connection to Winklebury is important, and that holistic approach, Winklebury and Manydown. Walking and cycling was a key issue. Personally, I welcomed the loose density that was talked about. That sounded really good. And I very much like the courtesy crossings. That sounds like a brilliant idea for this sort of development. We should have more of those. And the green fingers. But I'm confident that officers have got down many more than that. And of course, you'll be able to inspect the draft minutes to make sure that everything that we want to say has been said in those. So I think without more ado, we have no confidential items and nothing more on our agenda except to review the work programme. And I think we'll hand over to Andrew to tell us about that, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So this is just the normal format for just giving you an update on the forward plan, the majority of which is sort of in the format that we've had this evening. So predominantly it is useful to have our development partner coming along and attending and giving you an update. The officers will give you an update on Manydown South as that is progressing. So we think, and we're planning for probably a meeting of this sort of special meeting in December to review the overarching business plan for Manydown North. As being referenced this evening, there is work in earnest on getting that complete, and we would wish to bring that back into a confidential session and briefing with you probably in December. Following on from that, the next meeting in February, we will pick up with you work more detailed on Manydown South as part of the promotion for the Regulation 18, and sitting alongside that would then be the additional work on Manydown North in terms of the more detailed planning, which again, you've been given an insight into this evening by Urban and Civic, and we will be looking to bring a more comprehensive update back in terms of the work that's been undertaken. So quite a comprehensive programme. We still have the outstanding sort of workshop that we've committed to around carbon, and Urban and Civic made that offer again this evening. So we are looking to try and get a session in before Christmas on that, so that we can progress that intervention on the work that they're doing. Unless there are any other items, Chair, that the members would wish us to bring forward, that's the proposal before you this evening.
Thank you very much. I just might be helpful if you could just raise your hand if you might be interested in going to see the development at Rugby, which obviously Urban and Civic are quite keen for us to see. Do we generally, would we generally like to do that? I would. Yeah, I think, okay. I think, Andrew, perhaps if we have a bit more notice next time, I think it was just a bit short notice for a lot of people, but that would be great. Okay.
Indeed, Chair, and we are working on a date that gives you, sufficient advance notice on that, so that people can work their diaries around it. It's always challenging, but we're doing our best to try and get an appropriate date.
Thank you very much. Sounds like a nice day out. So I think there's nothing else on the agenda. So without more ado, we'll bring the meeting to a close, and I will say good night to you.